Good morning and welcome to the school year 2022 DMI training. My name is Val Murdoch and I am the Title I specialist at the Utah State Board of Education. And during this training, my goal is to help you navigate the desktop monitoring instrument, as well as to help you understand how to complete the forms that are required and how to upload those to your specific LEA's library. To start off with, I have the handout that should have been included with the link to this training. In this handout, for those of you who have completed the DMI multiple times, this may be the only support you need because it includes the link to the DMI. It goes over how to prevent most all problems, as well as how to navigate the forms in the DMI and the uploads. As far as color coding goes on this handout, red indicates changes or required uploads. So it's just to get your attention that something is new or something is needed. And blue is more of a help. When you get to these tables, they reference the resource tab for each of the items and the different resources that are located under that tab. To prevent almost all problems, please follow these 3 steps. When you get to the criteria questions that will be required for both Cycle 2 and the annual core, make sure to answer all questions. Leave none of them marked with none. In fact, coming down here is a visual representation of how that would look, moving the radio button from none to either no or yes, whichever is true for that particular item. The next thing that helps prevent most problems is to click save after everything you do. Sometimes you have to search for the save button at the bottom of the page. So some scrolling is required. And then the third way to prevent problems is at the end. Just because you clicked on submit doesn't mean you're finished. You need to click submit again to confirm that you really did mean to submit it. Again, in every item that requires an upload, there are instructions on how to access the forms, how to upload the web links, the URLs, and how to upload the documents, either the forms once you completed them or evidence that you have collected over the last year or this year so far. As I mentioned, there are 2 parts to the DMI, the cycle, and this year we're on cycle 2 of 4 cycles, as well as the annual core. And the annual core doesn't repeat. It's more of items that stay constant from year to year. And then I have associated the number of criteria questions you will need to respond to for each of those parts of the DMI. Quickly, just an overview, cycle 2 is new. The contents are new. In cycle 2, the focus is on parents' rights. And under Title I, there are multiple rights that parents have. And I've divided those into 2 items. The first item has to do with those parents' rights that LEAs are responsible for ensuring. And the second item, which is number 9, is those responsibilities that schools are responsible for ensuring. Those, not the responsibilities, the parents' rights that schools are responsible for ensuring. Whether you're a charter LEA or a district LEA, you will complete both of these items. There's a third item that I will demonstrate how to complete that. And going on to the annual core, there is a heads up in red right here, letting you know that beginning next year, you will need to upload a working URL, working link to your LEA website, demonstrating that you make the LEA and school report cards accessible to the public. If for some reason you don't have a website, there is a process that you can go through to ensure that you are making those data available to the public, and there will be an alternate method of demonstrating compliance with that next year. But for this year, it's still an assurance. Yes, we make this information accessible to the public. Number 2 in the annual core is a brand new upload, and that has to do with family engagement, and it is an LEA self-assessment. Number 34 has to do with the annual Title I meetings that schools are responsible to host every year. And every year there is evidence that is required to be uploaded. This year, I will be looking for those 4 parts, those 4 components that I discussed in the spring Title I directors meeting. And we'll go into more detail when we get to item 34 in the DMI. Just for those of you who are not going to go further than this handout, make sure that you look at the resource tab in item 34 if you're unsure what those requirements are, if you need more information. Items 39 and 40, 41, and 42 are all for districts that have private schools. Actually, 39 is for all districts, whether they have private schools or not. And so charter LEAs are not responsible for responding to this. And the criteria questions help in this regard, because when you answer our LEA is a charter, not a district, then you will not be presented with these items. For those district LEAs that do have private schools in them, or for all districts, this is highlighted in yellow just to bring your attention that the Utah grants also has some areas where you need to demonstrate compliance with the equitable services to private schools. So it's kind of divided into both the DMI and Utah grants. Also, just to make sure that if you are not the same person that completes the Title I application in Utah grants, that you get that person the information they need to complete the private school section in Utah grants. So what they need to do when they get to Utah grants is to account for every single private school and the response that that private school gave, even if they did not respond to the invitation for a consultation. And then going to the fiscal items, there's only a change in the wording in the maintenance of effort. It's still an assurance, but instead of saying the LEA maintains its fiscal effort, it's been changed to the LEA has a written policy to make sure that they maintain maintenance of effort. Supplement and not supplant is also an assurance unless you are a charter LEA that has added a campus in the last year. Then you would need to create a supplement, not supplant methodology. And in the resources tab, there are examples. There is the section in the handbook that you can read to get more information. The other reason you would need to actually upload for this item would be that you've made a change to your supplement, not supplant methodology. And then comparability has an upload, as does time and effort. And there's a little change in time and effort that I'll discuss when we get to that item. The last thing I want to bring your attention to on the handout are the contact information for Renee, Becky Peters, and please contact either of them if you have problems logging in, if you need access to the DMI, if you need somebody removed because they no longer are in a role where they need to access the DMI. And please contact me if you have any questions regarding Cycle 2 or the annual core or completing the DMI in general. Okay, I would like to, not show you my big face. go to the login page of the DMI, and it's pretty exciting that we finally, after all these years, have an updated logo. And instead of saying the State Office of Education, it actually says the State Board of Education. You notice on the login that you can reset your password, that if you've been sent an invitation to create a login, that you can do that here. If you have troubles, if you don't have Renee or Becky Peters' contact information on hand, you can always email the DMI help desk at schools.utah.gov, and both of them check that for notifications on a regular basis, and so they can help you out that way as well. So in just logging in, you won't have to do this. You'll be taken directly to your LEA page. It's the overview, and it's important to remember this tab because you can get back to this home screen by just clicking on the overview or on home. On this page, you'll notice that the two instruments are listed here, as well as the school year. It will automatically populate to the current school year, but just notice that you can go back in years if you have a question, and I'll actually demonstrate that on cycle 2. So let's get started on cycle 2. When I come here, I notice that the LEA submitters are listed, and if you need to change that, that's when you could contact Renee or Becky Peters. The 2 criteria questions are the first things that you need to address. And remember, this is how you prevent most problems, by changing none to either yes or no. So do you have school-wide programs in your LEA? Or do you have approved targeted assistance programs in your LEA? Some LEAs will have both, but most LEAs have one or the other. Now I've added a note because every once in a while someone forgets, or we get new Title I directors that may not be sure. So if you're unsure at all, it's easy to check last year's response. So to do that, remember our LEA overview, come back to the school year, change it to last year, and update that. Now, the only one that this would not, the only LEAs that this would not work with is if you applied for a school-wide program and you were approved to start running a school-wide program. So I'll click on cycle 1, I'll go to the criteria question tab, and I'll look at how I answered this last year, or how the Title I director answered it last year. They answered yes to school-wide programs and no to targeted assistance. So I know that we have school-wide programs. Okay, get back to the overview page, change it back to this year. And now I know how to answer that criteria question. Yes and no. And the second way to prevent most problems is to save. Once I have my criteria questions answered, the items page, the items tab will populate, and it may not open, it may not expand all. So I just want to show you here, this little box helps you expand all, so you can see all the items that you need to address. So here we see parents' rights to know is the first category, and then the second category is the redundant item I couldn't remove out of the platform for some reason. So let's address the LEA level parents' rights to know indicator first. On this one, I see a red box, and I see upload required in capital letters. So those are some clues that I need to upload evidence on this item. Another way that I can tell is this required tab tells me I need to respond. Please see the form to be completed under the resources tab. So there's some information about the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and what the regulation is. So LEAs are required annually to provide certain information, opportunities, and notices to parents and family members. And so this form will require the LEA to indicate the protocol or the process that they have in place to ensure that parents and family members are provided with each of the requirements. So here are the instructions. To access the form, go to the Resources Grade tab below, download the form and save to your computer, complete the form, and then save, and then I'll show you how to attach that. So we come to the Resources tab, and then you see the Word document here, and you can click on that to download, and remember to save it to your computer before you fill it out. I already have mine completed, so I will click on that to show you what that looks like. So I have highlighted, these are the LEA responsibilities, so you don't get the forms confused. Who's completing the form, and then the name of the LEA. So just a brief summary is all that is needed for how you ensure that parents are made aware of these rights. The first one is notify the right of the parent to request the professional qualifications of their child's teachers. Now, a lot of times we think of this as the school requirement. And so this is one of the purposes for Cycle 2, the revamp of Cycle 2 is to help ensure that these are actually, the parents' rights are actually being communicated to them. So I've given you some examples of what you might be doing already and that you could put in there. Number one, the LEA requires each Title I school to include this notification in their annual Title I meeting. So see, the LEA could put it onto the schools as a requirement. It's a more natural fit there. Information is also posted on the LEA and school websites. So that's one possible answer. Number two, the LEA sends out a notice at the beginning of the school year informing parents and family members how to request this information if desired. Now notice in the verbiage, it's the LEA is just notifying them that they have this right. You don't have to broadcast every teacher's qualifications. Now with the new teacher certification program, you do have to list how many LEA specific licenses have been awarded at your school. So in some respect, this might go on that page, this notification. So some possible ways to make parents aware. Now just posting on a website is not enough, but to post on a website and then include the link in a newsletter would definitely help parents be able to access the information they need. You would continue that for each of the items and then save. And then let me show you how to upload that. I'll go to all documents. And then up here in tiny little font with a big plus sign next to it is attached document. Here I want to choose a new file because it's not already uploaded. If for some reason you've uploaded all your files, then you could choose from an existing file. Here's how you would link to a URL. But since this form is required, I want to choose that particular form. And I look for LEA Parents' Rights. And it uploaded right here. And instead of a save button, I have an attach button. So I'll click on that. Then I can come down here and make sure that that's listed in my all documents associated with this item. And indeed, it was updated today. Well, today's 8/26, and by whom. The last thing you need to do on each item is to change the status. So currently it says in progress. If I leave it in progress, I'll never be able to submit it. So I can change it to meets requirements, does not meet requirements, or is not monitored. So I meet requirements because all I needed to do is fill out the form. Now, if for some reason you want to communicate why you filled out the form the way you did, or you just have special circumstances in your LEA, you can make comments to the state, to me. And so you can just type your comments in there, make sure to save. You don't need to type comments, those are not required, just optional. This takes us, when we click on next item, this takes us to the school level parents' rights to know. And we'll go through the same process. Notice there's a red box getting our attention. There are capital letters getting our attention. We come down here, we notice that we need to access the form under the resources tab. Again, the instructions are located here. Oh, I forgot to tell you on the last one, my contact information is right here. If you have a question on any particular item, you can call me while you're working in the DMI. Okay, so what does this form look like? We'll go to resources, download that, but because I already have mine, I'll click on that. This is the school responsibilities. However, the LEA person could complete this form. It does not have to be a school personnel. If you're a district LEA and you're not quite sure how schools ensure these rights are being communicated to parents, then you need to find out. You might ask a school principal to help you complete this form if needed. Remember that if you just check in with one principal, you need to make sure that all principals at Title I schools are ensuring these requirements are in place, or the protocols are in place. So again, the district person or the charter LEA person could be the one completing the form, and the school represented. So this is not the LEA, but the school represented. So let's just take, actually, I gave you examples on the fourth one down. Provide a description and explanation of the curriculum and assessments used to measure student progress. So how does the school ensure this is done? 2 examples. This school could, during the annual Title I meeting, describe its ELA, math, and science curricula, and provide families with a timeline and explanation of the assessments used. So it could be built into the PowerPoint presentation. Or maybe during parent-teacher conferences, teachers on that individual basis go over their grade-specific curriculum and explain the assessments that will be used throughout the school year. So a couple of possibilities. You would complete that. The last 2 items are for school-wide programs only. So if you're a target assistant, you can just put NA for not applicable. Save that. And then let's just quickly review how you would upload that document from your folder. One suggestion I have is that you create an uploads folder where you have everything ready to go. You could work on it one at a time because many of you get interrupted as you're trying to complete this. So you might work on a few items and then come back to it. So I'm going to choose, let's see, attach documents in the All Documents tab. It's a new file and it's the school parents' rights. It uploaded here, and instead of saving, I attach. And I can go to the next item, but before I do that, I need to change the current status to meets requirements. Now let's say you discover, if you're a district LEA, that your schools are not doing everything. What you could do is in the comment box, you could say, does not meet requirements, and you could give an explanation of, we will work on this over the next couple of months to ensure we have protocols or processes in place. Okay, I'm going to say that we do meet requirements and then go to the next item. Okay, like I mentioned, I was not able to disassociate this item from its deep dark link to something in the DMI. So on this one, it just gives you the instruction to mark it not monitored. Oops, not monitored. And then the previous item, so we know we're at the end. So what I'm going to do is just go to the overview of cycle 2. Now I should have a submit button right here, but I don't. So I can't submit it to the state. Some of you might have noticed what I did in the last one. This is still, if I come to the overview of cycle 2, this is still in progress or in process. So what I need to go do is click on that item and then just edit, not monitored, and then that all important save button. Then I can go back to cycle 2 and I think I don't have a submit button. And magically, I have a submit button. So change status to submitted. I click on that. Now, even though it says it's in red right here, confirm instrument status change, and it has another submit button, it's easy to think you just submitted it and go on to the next item. And then I contact you and say, I haven't received this. It shows up not submitted. So make sure if you see red that you click submit again. And then I see status is submitted, so I can confirm that. Let's go back to the LEA overview page, and it also shows up as submitted here. Okay, now we're ready to go on to the annual core items. Again, when I click on that, I'm taken directly to the criteria questions, and they're all marked none. So I need to change the answer to each of those to either yes or no, depending on my LEA. Are you a charter school serving a single site? Let's say I am. Then on number 2, are you a charter who manages more than one site? I would answer no. Are you a district? No. If I'm not a district, then the private school questions are answered no. So 4 and 5 are no. Does your LEA use Title I Part A funds to pay the salaries of employees? Almost every LEA chooses to use some of its Title I funding to pay salaries. So I'm going to click save on that to save it. And that's one scenario. And that will populate 8 items just to show you the difference. If I go back to the criteria tab and I say, no, I'm not a single site charter. Yes, I am a multi-site charter. Let's see what happens there. That changes my item count to 10. So you see, it's really important that you answer the criteria questions correctly. So let's say that I am a district and I do consult with private schools. Then I'm going to save that combination of criteria questions, and I now need to respond to 14 items. Okay, here it has not expanded. So I need to come to the box to expand that. And I can see all 14 items I need to respond to. Even though I answered the criteria questions as a district LEA, it's all encompassing of all the items that charter LEAs will need to respond to. You might just choose to fast forward through the items that don't correspond to your particular LEA. Okay, this first one does correspond to all LEAs. This has to do with the LEA and school report cards. Now notice there's no red box, but there are some capital letters going on here, so it's kind of confusing. There's no required upload. So I better read. So next year, so school year 2022-2023, an upload will be required. That would be either a working link to the LEA report card and school report cards, or if the LEA does not have access to the website capability, a copy of the report card, as well as a description of how they make that accessible to the public. This year, it's still an assurance, but I'm just giving you a heads up that next year an upload will be required. So I come down here and I am assuring, if I'm completing this before the state has the report cards ready to go, I am ensuring that I will do that I have done it in the past, that it's linked to our website, or that I have a process of making it accessible to the public. Okay, moving on to the next item. This is the new item, the evaluation of family engagement, and this is an item every LEA will address. There is a red box, there are capital letters. In every LEA family engagement policy, you included a section on having an annual evaluation of the content and effectiveness of the engagement policy in improving the academic quality of all schools served. Now, you might have forgotten about that, or you might be aware of it, and you might have one question on a survey somewhere. So what I found in the monitoring process is it might be helpful for LEAs to start becoming more conscious of how they are evaluating their family engagement policy and activities. So it's just a self-assessment. And because last year was unique, you may choose to reflect on either last year or the previous year, because the previous year, 2019-20, was a little more, quote, normal, at least until March. So reflecting on either one of those, you can complete the self-assessment. Now, some LEAs discovered, wow, we actually had better family engagement through the Zoom platform or other virtual platforms. So we need to come down here to our resource tab. There's the download there, but you'll also notice I link to a website. It's Engaging Families and Communities Toolkit, because as you go through the assessment, you might have questions like, well, what could we do differently? How could we involve families that that might have more challenges to being involved, more barriers to being engaged than other families? So notice those are in the resources tab. Also a link to our family engagement USBE webpage. So I'll download that, but I also happen to magically have it ready to go. And I've completed it for my LEA. I'm reflecting on last year, but again, you can reflect on the previous year, 2019-20. So this is the law, section 1116 of the ESEA, and each one of those parts are listed out. So number one, the LEA conducts with meaningful involvement of parents and family members an annual evaluation of the content and effectiveness of the engagement policy. So, I'm going to mark that as it's an established practice in our LEA. We every year get parents together and we look at the content and the effectiveness of the engagement policy. Other options would be it's not yet in place, it's an emerging practice, or it's an we innovatively implement it. Now, if you mark any of these boxes, I will be calling you to find out what it is you're doing to innovatively implement family engagement, the annual evaluation of family engagement. Going on to number two, the LEA and school personnel strategically collect and analyze data to determine the barriers to greater participation. Well, we do collect data, but we don't really spend a lot of time analyzing it, and we really haven't gotten to identifying many barriers. So, this is just an emerging practice for us. So you see how you do that for each one of these, and you notice that I clicked on not yet in place on a couple of these. So it's not a problem if you click not yet in place. What would be a problem is we don't see any movement in that to an emerging practice, to an established practice over the next few years. So again, the purpose of the self-assessment is to identify areas of strength as well as areas for potential growth. So to upload that, we're going to follow the same process, going to all documents, attach, choose that file, and attach. Before we move on, we edit. Now, we might feel like it does not meet requirements because we might not be implementing all parts of 1116 of the ESEA. So what I'm going to ask you to do is check meets requirements if you actually honestly went through and completed the self-assessment for your LEA. Again, feel free to write notes, any notes to clarify anything that you need. Okay, annual Title I meeting. All LEAs are required to upload evidence. You have been required for many years to upload evidence. This year, you need to make sure you include these 4 areas of evidence. You need to make sure that all parents and family members of participating children are invited and encouraged to attend. Now, it should be a meeting that's created for all families. It's not a meeting where it's created for a smaller body, but all parents are invited if they want to come. So SCC meetings, charter board meetings will no longer be the place that you can give the Title I meeting information and expect all parents to receive it. So it needs to be based on a designed meeting for all parents. That could be a back to school night, which is designed for all families. It needs to be have its own separate agenda items on it, but it certainly could be part of that overall meeting. The content requirements are included in the tips and required topics handout that was distributed in the spring Title I meeting and is also listed in the resource tab. So if you want more information on those required topics, you would click here. I've also included a sample PowerPoint that you could use. It might be too late for this year, but you could use it to refine your presentation for next year. Okay, so I have let's see. So I'm going to go to my attached document page, and I'm going to choose. For those of you who attended that spring Title I directors meeting, you might remember that I used Scholar Academy's example of their meeting because they included so much of the required information and did such a great job making it meaningful for parents. Okay, so let me just double check. I did upload that. It's included down here. I need to change the status. Now, what if I'm new and the last Title I director didn't tell me about this new requirement? I need to make sure I included evidence of all components. Then you need to create a presentation or a detailed agenda for next year. And you need to write a note that says, we failed to meet that requirement this year, but this is what we have for next year. And I will let you know if it meets requirements. Okay, but because I'm using Scholar Academies, I get to mark, yes, it meets requirements, and move on to the next item. Now, if you are a charter LEA, you can fast forward through this recording till you get to item 43, I believe it is. So the next 4 are about private schools. If you are an LEA that has no private schools, stick around for this one, and then you can fast forward. So every year, district LEAs need to do their due diligence of looking for any private nonprofit schools that serve students in the Title I attendance areas located in that LEA. So even if you didn't have a private school last year, you need to do your due diligence and look to see if any have popped up for this year. For any private schools that do exist in your Title I attendance areas, you need to send an invitation that invites them to consult on Title I equitable services to find out what Title I equitable services even means. Okay, so you're going to, if you don't have any private schools, change this to not monitored. And then you can fast forward to item 41. If you do have private schools that serve students in your Title I attendance areas, then you will need to upload your letter of invitation to consult. I just want to show you some of the resources. It's too late for this year, but if you want to use any of these for the upcoming the upcoming invitation that you send out, say in February or March, to plan for the next year, I have a consultation for all ESEA programs, or I also have a sample invitation for just Title I, because I know some of you consult on more than just Title I. You consult on Title III, you consult on Title 4A or 4B or 1 Part C. So there are Word versions and PDF. I also included this private school search. I don't know how comprehensive it is, but because sometimes it's hard to know if we've included all private schools that we should, I've linked that for your use. Okay, let me show you what that document looks like. I'll attach. So my invitation for LaSalle Academy, I'll attach that. And then let me open that for you. I have it open already. So this is the blank one. So it just has an area that all this could be filled in. It has a response box, 3 different choices they could make, their signature, and then ways that you want it sent back, either through email or through regular mail. And then you can insert the due date. I'm sorry, this is not the first page. The overview page shows who it's to, who it's from, and then it gives a brief overview of all the ESEA title programs that you might be consulting on, so you can remove some. You don't have to include all of them because you might not get funding for all of them. So I've uploaded that. I'm going to change this. Oh, I didn't save it anyway. Change it to meets requirements because I did send out those invitations. And move on to the next item. Now you can send out invitations, but that doesn't mean private schools are going to be interested or show up to the consultation. So what needs to happen is if you send out notifications and you don't hear back, you don't get this letter back from them, you don't get an email back, follow up with an email or a phone call. Keep a phone log and the message that was left or the conversation that you had. So there should be multiple attempts to let private schools know that they can consult with you on equitable services. For those that do, you are going to upload your affirmation of consultation, and I'll show you what the affirmation of consultation looks like for, this is for multiple ESEA programs. So it has the LEA information, the private school information, and then all the topics that we needed to talk about. Oh, sorry, this is just for Title I, I apologize. And it has their decision on, they decided to participate in equitable services, or after all that, all the hoops they found out they needed to jump through to get those funds, or not the funds, the equitable services, they decided that they did not want to participate in equitable services. A signature of the LEA, a signature of the private school. And then you would upload that. Let me show you quickly what I was referring to. Here is an affirmation of consultation for all ESEA programs. So you could use this if you want for next year. So you could see, you consulted on which of these programs, the talking points for Title I and the talking points for all other title programs. And then after the consultation, which did they choose to participate in? And again, the same areas for signatures. Okay, let's go to the next two items are just assurances. So the 40, oh, I guess 43 was the next one you all needed to fast forward to. Private school nonprofit funding. So you meet requirements if you set aside off the top of your Title I allotment funds for equitable services, and that those funds reserved for services for private school students are based on the same criteria used to allocate Title I funds to the public schools. If this is the case, then you're going to mark meets requirements and move on to the next private school assurance. And this one is that services and benefits for eligible private nonprofit school students are equitable in comparison to the services that are provided to public students. Well, again, no document is needed. That's kind of Utah Grants Management System has that information. Meets requirements. And now we should all be together in the fiscal maintenance of effort policy and procedures. This item does not require an upload. However, there has been some language change in this particular item. So maintenance of effort is that the LEA demonstrates the level of local and state funding remains relatively constant from year to year. That has always been, yes, we maintain that effort. But now the focus is on having a written policy and procedures for maintaining it. How do you ensure that you will maintain that effort year after year? So the wording, the policy has always been required, but now the focus in the DMI is you're assuring you do have that policy. So if you don't have a written policy for maintenance of effort, you can contact Tammy For more information, if you have questions on what that might look like, also, you might choose to say does not meet requirements if you need to have that policy created and approved by your board. If you do have that policy in place, then again, it's just an assurance. And you can move on to the next item, which is supplement, not supplant. In supplement, not supplant, this requires that Title I funding is used in addition to, not in place of, state and local funds. So every LEA that has more than just one school that receives Title I funds must have a supplement, not supplant methodology. Most of you have that in place. You've had it in place for the last 3 years. If you are a charter LEA that has added a campus in the last year, then you will need to upload a supplement, not supplant methodology. If you are an LEA that has had changes to your written methodology in the last year, please indicate that in the LEA comment box and then upload a copy of the revised methodology. If you meet requirements, you can change that. Obviously, single site charters don't have this item. Comparability. So multi-site, this is to compare Title I with non-Title I. But if all schools are Title I, you also complete this to ensure that state and local funds taken as a whole are substantially comparable. If an LEA has only a single school at a grade band, so one elementary school, one middle school, one high school, then you would not need to complete a comparability, and you could just indicate that in the comment box. But if you have 2 schools at any grade span, whether they're Title I or a Title I and a non-Title I, then you need to complete the comparability spreadsheet. The only other exceptions are if you have less than 1,000 students overall in your entire LEA. So for all schools, less than 1,000 students. And then the other exception would be that you don't have a Title I school with more than 100 students. So none of your Title I schools have more than 100 students in them. Okay. So let's go to the resource tab. And here I can download the comparability forms. I can also reference the Title I Part A handbook and see what's required there. Okay, so I can download it, but I just happen to have it ready to go. So on this, at the bottom, you can see there are 5 forms, A, B, C, D, and E. You have option 1, which is to complete form A, B, C, and D. Or you complete form for option 2, A, B, D, and E. And I'll tell you what those options entail as we go through. So this is just overview page, has my information. I prepared it. It also has, a place for the signature of the LEA administrator. It does not need to be an electronic signature. You do not need to download it, print it off, sign it by hand, scan it in. Just, this is cursive font built into the form, so you can just write the name in there. And then the title, Rebecca Donaldson is a superintendent. And then obviously you have to wait for current data to be established. So you might not be ready to complete that as early as August, September. Okay, as I go to Form B, I need to list all the Title I schools that I have, and whether they are smaller schools or larger schools, and you are able to indicate that. So I chose to indicate that we just have large schools, 401 to 696 is what we consider large schools. So kindergarten through sixth grade, the number of non-Title I schools is 4, and the number of Title I schools is 3. We do not provide Title I funds to our middle schools or to our high schools. If we did, if we only had one middle school or one junior high that received that, we would not need to include them in the comparability because there's nothing to compare them to. But if we had a Title I middle school and a Title I this is the non-Title I school, one Title I middle school and more than one or more non-Title I schools, then I would need to complete the comparability also for middle school. Same process with high school. Form C, you will complete Form C if you want to do option 1. Option 1 is going to look at student to instructional staff ratio, as well as the instructional supplies and curriculum materials ratio, the expenditure on those supplies and materials expenditure. So that's option 1, and I would complete Form C, and Form D has to do with those with supplies and materials expenditures. So let's go through and see what that entails. So I list my non-Title I schools up here and my Title I schools down here. I list the grade span as well as the enrollment, the total instructional staff. When I'm counting up the total instructional staff, that can include teachers and other professionals who provide direct instructional services, such as music, art, physical education teachers, guidance counselors, speech therapists, librarians, social workers, psychologists. So if I count social workers in the non-Title I schools, I need to make sure that I count them in Title I schools as well. I need to be consistent in the way I count. I would suggest you do not include paraprofessionals because comparability is looking at state and local funding. It doesn't really help to list the paraprofessionals. In fact, it would throw off the comparability form to do that. If you're going to choose to list paraprofessionals that are paid with state and local funds, carefully consider whether paraprofessional is equivalent to a teacher or other instructional staff members. So once you have that total number of staff for each of the non-Title I schools, this will calculate automatically and give you an average down here. In our non-Title I schools, we do the same thing, list the enrollment and the total instructional staff, FTE. This will automatically calculate and compare to the average. So the student to instructional staff ratio should be lower in order to get this cell green and yes. So before you submit this form or upload it, you need to make sure that all of these cells have been changed to green yes. If you have a problem on it, you cannot for some reason get it to work, then you can contact Tammy, and her contact information is in item 43, or what item are we on? We're on 45. Her information is there and you can contact her. Form D, we also need to fill out for option 1. Our non-Title I schools, oops, I didn't click on Form D. Our non-Title I schools, how much do they receive based on their enrollment? How much in instructional supplies, curriculum materials do they receive in state and local funds? This will give an average of per pupil. And then that average will be compared to the average for for the Title I schools. Okay, so this should be similar. This can be higher, and this would be yes. So you have to spend as much or more at Title I schools on instructional supplies and curriculum materials to get this to change to green, yes. Option 2 would be to complete this Form D as well as Form E, and that is to compare the amount of the staff base salaries at non-Title I schools with that of those the teacher salaries at Title I schools. Most LEAs choose to complete option 1, so the first 4 forms, but some do choose to go with option 2, whatever is easiest for you. Okay, before I forget, let me show you, here is Tammy Long's information, so you can contact her if you have questions on the comparability form. Okay, go to my all documents. Once I've saved this to my computer, make sure you save it before you complete it. Attach. And save that by attaching it. And our next item is time and effort. Some of you might notice that we only have one item. Oops. We only have one item for time and effort. In the past, we've had 2. The reason for this is back in 2015, there was a change in the way time and effort, the focus of time and effort. It went from being dictatorial to this is the way you have to do it to, okay, you as an LEA need to have a system of internal controls, which provides reasonable assurance that any time being charged is accurate, allowable, and properly allocated. So really it puts the pressure on the onus on the LEA to create policy and procedures for ensuring this happens. So due to this focus, what we would like you to do is to continue to upload a blank copy of your time and effort form, but that form should be reflective of your internal controls. So 46 is all about assuring that you have those internal controls in place and then uploading evidence of the way that you keep track of time and effort. Now, you may have multiple forms for different scenarios. You can upload all the forms that you have. If you have a digital method for keeping track of time and effort, you can do a screenshot of that. We don't need personal information. That's why we ask for a blank copy, and upload that as evidence. Again, if you have any questions on time and effort, feel free to contact Tammy. And then I am just going to skip over this for time's sake, but you do upload that in this. Oh, well, we know what I just did. I forgot to change the status to meets requirements. And then another fiscal item, property records and equipment inventory. This is another assurance that you have a written policy in place that you can maintain property records purchased with Title I funds, actually any federal funds. So this is not just for Title I, but you should have a written policy and procedure in place for purchasing equipment with federal funds. So again, it's an assurance. You don't need to upload that policy or the procedures, but you do need to ensure that's in place. Just a reminder that equipment does not include books or furniture. Any questions on that, you can contact Tammy. And I'll change the status to meets requirements. And moving on to The audit, if your LEA receives a total amount of $750,000 or more in federal funds, not just in Title I, but federal funding, you need to assure that you have a single audit done yearly. If you receive less than that $750,000 in federal funds, then you need to assure you have a fiscal audit done yearly. And the last item is procurement and expenditures, another assurance that you have these written policies and procedures in place. In all of the fiscal items, the 2 CFR 200 citation that corresponds to each of the indicators has been cited. And so you can go back to that 2 CFR for more details if you need it. Again, you can reach out to Tammy if you have questions about procurement and expenditures. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm just going to go to my annual Title I overview, the annual core overview. And I kind of, as I was talking, feel like I missed updating. I sure did. I missed updating the comparability. So I will come down here, make sure that I uploaded that document. I did, because I have one listed and I can see it down here. So I will change that to meets the requirements. And now when I go to my annual core items, I have that submit button now, and I can change that to submitted. Remember to click it twice. Okay, that's it for this year's DMI training. Again, this is one possible support to you. The handout that accompanied the link could help remind you of what you need to do for uploads or any changes. And if you would like additional support, remember the afternoon of the next Title I Directors meeting held September 29th from 1 to 3 will be office hours for the DMI. So Title I Directors meeting in the morning and the DMI office hours from 1 to 3 the afternoon of the 29th. And of course, you can call me anytime and we can get on a Zoom meeting if you would like, so we can share screens to figure things out, or phone call, whichever you prefer. Thank you so much, and I look forward to working with you this year.